All right, turn in your Bibles to Matthew 7. We're going to continue on the talking about fruit bearing. I purposely didn't have this in the lesson just for this little short Devo. So after Jesus here, he teaches on, how in Matthew 7, to about not judging, and going into keep asking, seeking, and knocking, and then he went into the narrow way. And then he goes into, you will know them by their fruits. And so he starts here in verse 15. He says, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. We looked at that in John 15, 2 and 6. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them. And so we look at Jesus using that metaphor again of this time he's not talking really about a vineyard. He's talking about a tree, two separate trees, one that bears good fruit, one that bears bad fruit. And he's talking about this spiritual discernment. And he tells us that we could know, we could just look at, how people will say, well, you don't know my heart. Only God knows my heart. And that's true. We don't look at people and judge them, but what does he say here? He says that false prophets will come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ravenous wolves. They're going to show you who they are. They may look like a sheep. I don't know if you ever saw that. They have that where they'll show sheep, and they'll have sheep, and then they'll put a wolf's face on one of the sheep. And that's how it is. You'll basically know that somebody, especially the way they teach, what they do, how they live, and so we think about with us spiritual discernment is we want to make sure. We talked about today about not bearing fruit, right? If you don't bear fruit, you're cut off. But we also don't want to be those with bad influence. We don't want to be those who are bearing bad fruit. We can be, and if and we may even think that we're doing good deeds or whatever, but if we're not, it's not of the Father. It's not. It's that fruit that God doesn't want you to bear. He wants you to bear good fruit unto Him. And then he says here, by their fruits, yeah, you will know them. By our fruits, God knows us. So we think about as we leave here, we think about as we walk out those doors. I know I often mention it's a mission field. How is our fruit? What does our fruit look like? Um, are we bearing that good fruit to God? Are we from the good tree? There's a good tree, there's a bad tree. You know, if you're striving to do what Christ wants you to do, you can't bear bad fruit. You can mess up. That's a different story. Different story. Just to sin, right? Just at times we're just not going to do right. We're going to mess up. Lord, forgive me. But you're not going to be one that walks in bad deeds, that bears the bad fruit. If you're of Christ and you're striving, like we've been talking about, you're going to have that good fruit in your life. So let's look at ourselves and see it, and like we said today, abide in Him, and make sure that's what we're doing. That the fruit that comes from our lives, that influence that comes from our lives, is always good fruit that glorifies God. The lesson is yours today. If you need to come forward, come stand as we sing the invitation.